Welcome to the Glucose Never Lies first ever Q&A. So Anjani asked me if I would do some monologuing to put something on Instagram, which
Not too
apparently
long.
a few people found quite entertaining. And actually from that stemmed quite a lot of questions that people wanted to ask about what the Glucose Never Lies is doing with certain things. And some diabetes-specific questions on things that we may have covered before or may have not. So we've decided to chuck in a little Q&A. So obviously, Angie, your third appearance now. You're the most repped guest actually after Lou in the early ones. So you're going to be firing the questions, right?
Yeah, I feel like you've got no choice because I'm part of the team, so I keep on turning up. So sorry to the listeners if you get really annoyed by me. Just keep on turning up again and again.
Sounds good. So obviously people on Instagram and also on emails, there's been quite a few questions about Grace that have come through, and also some questions about various different things. And you've obviously been in charge of collating those. So I'll hand the questions over to you and I'll try and I'm trying to keep them to relatively briefish answers. Is that the plan?
You can try your best.
Okay, I'll try.
So obviously a few things have gone on since the last time. We had like a quarterly review, but like you said, this is more of a Q&A. So you appeared as a guest yourself on a couple of podcasts recently. So do you want to give us a little bit of an overview as to what they were and what you discussed while you were there?
Yeah, sure. So Justin from Diabetech, who's probably got the most popular podcast, he does on YouTube with his own and also with Gary Shiner. I met him, I think, about 2 years ago at EASD, and we was talking about the difference between the CGMs in Europe versus the UK. And it's kind of shocked, really, at the difference in the certain levels of regulation. So I went on his show, and we just basically talked through that. The bottom line is, if you are going to be using a continuous glucose monitor for insulin dosing, it's not a commodities market. It's quite a highly specialized market where when the ultimate risk of inaccurate readings is an inaccurate insulin dose or omitting insulin when you should be given insulin, there is severe consequences, which can be the most severe in terms of death, possibly. It's not impossible, but also severe hypoglycemia and DKA. So when those kind of risks are the end product, you have to have a different bar for your safety filter. So that's why the requirement should be quite high for CGMs that want to get indications for insulin dosing. So obviously in America, that's quite a high bar, which is great for them. But for us, in Europe and further afield, the bar is not as high. Now, that's not to say that devices that only have CE marking are no good, because we've already had the Roche Smart Guide on here that doesn't have any American approval because they haven't gone there, but they have done a robust study. And we just really talked around. The only thing we've got in Europe at the moment is the Diabetes Specialist Nurse Forum chart with a basic study design score of 5 out of 5. And that's a decent way to approach a sensor or a CGM that has got decent data. And then also using the idea of this 20/20 metric, which we've got on there, which is how many readings are low or no risk. And that should be at least 9 out of 10 readings, and no more than 1 out of 10 readings 1 out of 100 readings, no more than 1% should be outside 40/40, which is very inaccurate readings. So all those available in the UK that meet those at the moment on European wide. So that's the Roche Smart Guide, the Medtronic products, Abbott Freestyle Libre products, and the Dexcom products all meet that bar. There's soon to be a couple of others that join there. I'm not going to say the names until they've actually joined. I've seen the data offline, but big thing for me is I don't think it should be that I should be able to see it and say this is safe to use, because I would want to know myself. It's only when it becomes publicly available that we'll switch it to a 5 out of 5 and then talk, and we'll actually get them on the podcast and then we'll have a chat about it. We talked a lot about that, and then we moved on quite rightly to what should the future look like. So even though we've got the DSN forum chart, I could now design a study that would meet the DSN 5 out of 5 and still get away with testing that doesn't really put the sensor under a full range of situations it may encounter in a normal day. So the way that I explain this on the show, and is probably the easiest way, is if you are going to purchase a car and you had 2 options and you were told they both passed whatever standard it was, then that's going to be, say, CE marking, or potentially even the DSN forum chart once people kind of work out how you could manipulate a 5 out of 5, and you've got that stamp. And then in the background, you kind of knew somebody who knew how they'd been tested. And you went up to them and said, oh, they've got car A and I've got car B. Tell me what testing they went to from a safety perspective. And they said to you, well, one of them had the crash dummy test driving at 30 miles an hour into a wall and the crash dummy was fine, and so did the other one. But then the other one went one step further and crashed at 70 miles an hour into a wall, and they were still fine, but the other one didn't. And you're going to get in there with your kids. Like, which car would you trust more? The one that's only been tested at 30 or the one at 70? And I think we all know the answer to that. But when you put it into those contexts, because when you crash your car, that's serious. It's really like insulin dosing. If you get a lot of inaccurate readings, it can be really serious. So in the future, what we'd like to see is it become an international standard that the equivalent of a 70-mile-an-hour crash into the wall test is required for CGMs to see how they perform when the glucose flies up really high without insulin for food, and when it comes flying down low with a big insulin dose where there's no food. So at the moment, that isn't a requirement, and that means that even all the best sensors in the world, which have got accuracy of what I just described before, they haven't achieved the accuracy during those stress tests. So the IFCC have put together a protocol and validated it, which is the stress test, and trying to now make that international a requirement. But there's a splinter group that's set off, which are mainly American, should I say, and they're saying, oh, no, we don't need the stress test. We're okay over here on our side of the pond, on the other side of the Atlantic, because our stuff's, it's all good. We've got the Dexcom, we've got the Abbott, we've got the Medtronic. We haven't got any of those products. So we'll just keep with this because it's a bit easier to do for the people who test it. I'm a little bit saying, fuck you. Like, you can...
Not the language for us. I'm going to bleep that out.
Yeah, like, if you want to look after your own backyard and just kind of only look after the people in America and then basically cause the no need for an international standard to properly stress test because we're okay Jack over in the States. Well, I just think, where's your skin in the game for the rest of the people with diabetes? I understand why it's easier for the test centers. I understand why the manufacturers would be happy with that because they don't have to change their testing procedures. So for them, they've got no incentive. So I guess my point of going onto that podcast was to say, in a wider audience, if you think it's important that future CGMs for insulin dosing are put through a proper stress test, the only people who are going to make that change happen are people with diabetes, charities who support people with diabetes, and patient-led organizations that don't have a commercial influence, are not run by researchers and people who are in the pockets of people who pay for their societies and pay for their study days and pay for all that stuff, then we have to stand up. We're going to have to stand up and get behind an international standard that's going to make sure that the stress testing is done so that when we put them on ourselves, we understand which ones have been stress tested and which ones haven't. And it can easily be done. The problem is the IFCC don't have the marketing power, don't have the money, don't have the spots at the big conferences to talk about their standard. They were going to be trying to push, and I obviously sit on that committee, so I've got a bit of a conflict of interest. When I say I've got a conflict of interest, the only conflict of interest I've got is I want the CGMs to be tested effectively. And I personally am not happy or not okay with doing a lesser standard because it's a bit easier to test and things won't have to do the change in testing, change the protocols and that. I'm like, fuck you. Like, what about the rest of the people in the world outside of the US who don't have that level of regulation? Let's look after them. And I'm not talking about people in the UK. I'm talking about people in Africa. I'm talking about people who do not have the regulation. They're going to be served up with CGMs for insulin dosing, which are way substandard to what we're getting in Europe. So if we get an international standard similar to the ISO for blood glucose, it takes all of that away because you either meet the standard or you don't. And now, granted, what it will probably mean, because it's a bit more specialized testing, it will probably mean there'll only be 5 to 7 centers in the world that will be able to do the testing good enough. Well, good. Because that means that when you know it's been tested by one of these centers, it's been done proper, not just been sent down the road to someone who you know and be like, can you just put this through a few of your patients and we'll, kind of meet the DSN forum chart 5 out of 5 and we'll get an insulin dosing indication. I don't want that to be the future of insulin dosing. When we get more of these AID systems, you want to make sure it's been tested properly. And the only way to do it is by having an international standard, having a limited number of test centers that can do it properly with skilled expertise. And the thing about the American system is hilarious because in CE marking, we have 40 different bodies that do the testing for CGM, which means that none of them can be specialized in that. They do everything. Now in the US, they've got one, the CRDH. But now what they're saying when it comes to, we're okay to have one for regulation, but when it comes to who can ever do the test, we can have it from anywhere. They don't have to be that specialized. It's this thing. Well, that goes against their model completely. They should be having specialist test centers to send it through. So even if you look from that perspective, the FDA should be looking at that and going, if this is a specialized high-risk thing, we should be having specialized centers who do the testing properly, like we have a specialized review process. So it's all ass about face, to be honest. Like, it's easy for me because I don't have a scientific position or whatever. I'm on the IFCC as kind of just basically a noisy person who gives a crap for people with diabetes. But, I've hopefully made that point clear here quite clearly. But on that show, we kind of talked about that in some depth and really tried to help people in America to get outside of their own boxed thinking in the US and think about a worldwide population of people with diabetes. And as more people with type 2 go on and taking insulin, the risk remains the same for those guys as well. So it's not just them. So yeah, it wasn't quite as much of a rant as that. I was a little bit more conservative and thing. But what I really
don't care about the level
what
of
I really wanted to
ranting
say
here.
was like,
Your platform.
the people who are sat on that group trying to push through a substandard testing procedure because it's because it's easier for people, I just think, fuck you, basically. Like, get your head out of your own little sandbox of what's good for you and what's good for the companies who you like and what's good for the testing centers that you like, and actually look at the end user and decide what's best for the people who are going to be taking the risk of using these devices to give insulin doses. And the answer is pretty simple. Stress test is absolutely essential. 5 to 10 high-quality testing centers across the world who know how to do things properly. And then we'll know what's what. And we'll understand the risks. And then everything moving forward with AID systems and the rest of it will be as safe as they possibly can be. And the risks will be understood. It is that simple, but obviously politically it's very different. So we'll see what happens. But that was my gambit from there. And we've put myself and Tim Street, who listeners may or may not know, should know, from a different Diabetech, the UK one. He's been on this for a long time, of putting an article for Diabetes Care to just discuss a bit further to try and get it out so the people with diabetes can, if they think it's important, they need to stand up. And the way you stand up, if you're listening to this and you think you really think it's important, you get hold of Breakthrough T1D, Diabetes UK, whoever your local charity is or a big paper representatives, point them towards this podcast or wherever you want to point them to and say, I think it's right that we should have a stress test of these CGMs before they get an insulin dosing indication. And if enough people go to their local charities, go to their national charities, and go to the key players who are supposed to have their back, then that's when things will happen, because the charities will be like, we're for the people. We need to push this. We're the patient organizations. We need to push this. And I also urge researchers and people in powerful positions in national committees who think this is important, put your neck on the line and say that it's important and push forward for it to something, because if you think it's important, you don't say anything, then you're complicit in allowing it to happen. So, it's kind of, you need a bit of skin in the game for this sort of stuff. And some people don't like necessarily doing that. But if we don't, what we're going to end up with is an international thing pushed through from the US, and it'll carry on as it is. And the companies very quickly will learn how to game the system. And then we'll end up with a set of sensors where we don't understand the risk. Now, they might be fine, but with the main issue AID system that's still available on the NHS has just had its main pivotal trial pulled when it's already been out for 4 years because of issues with lows and highs and inappropriate insulin doses, just tells you that this isn't a pretend thing. It's already happening and it's already real, and it's only going to get worse if we don't step up. So that was the first one. So total rant. I
want to stop you there. Okay, that was one question. We're 15 minutes in. Okay, hopefully the point is across. So basically, we don't have an international standard for when it comes to CGM testing, and John, and rightfully so, feels very passionate about that. Which, to be fair, it is crazy, like what they've been allowed to get away with when it comes to devices that people with type 1.
I don't blame the manufacturers. If you're a manufacturer, you take the quickest and fastest route to market. But otherwise, you're stupid.
Yeah, of course.
You're stupid. So it's no point in being angry at them. It's about change the rules. If you don't like it, go and change the rules. And if you've listened to this, don't be pissed off with the manufacturers, because they're doing exactly what you would do if you had a P&L sheet to do. You've got to go and change the rules.
Yeah. But then I think that's why it's important that someone like you is sitting on the board for, or like IFCC, because you don't have like a vested financial interest in any of the companies or anything like that. You're just somebody with
a microphone
and a big mouth.
It gives a crap. Yeah, exactly. A big mouth. Yeah.
Yeah, basically, that's what it is. You're just a northerner that gets really mad. Yes.
Okay, the second one was actually, do you know what? It's my favorite podcast
Oh, we
interview.
didn't even get around to the second one.
Yeah, no, you got to say no. The second one was my favorite. So I had this guy reach out to me, and he's like, "Oh, I've had a look at Grace." Which, so if people don't listen, if people are first to this, Grace is basically, I hate to say it, but it's just easier to understand. It's like a type 1 diabetes specific chat GPT that's a bounded model. So the only thing that Grace can access as a retrieval is the information that we put into her. So basically, we have built her through the guidelines as the base case, as the greatest source of truth, ISPAD, ADA, EASD. Then above that, all the guides that we've done on the glucose level eyes of how to interpret those, how to discuss them, how to actually have a conversation about these guidelines is the second layer. The third layer, and very, very important for me, is the philosophy of the glucose level eyes and Grace, which is based around Nassim Nicholas Taleb, which is first, type 1 diabetes is a black swan condition. And what black swan condition means is, everyone used to think all swans were white until eventually they found a black swan in Australia, and all of a sudden it was like it completely changed everything around. So it was an unexpected event, which happens rarely. That is what happens in type 1 diabetes. Things go fine for 30 years, and then something F's up, and all of a sudden people die. Whether it's through alcohol exposure, whether it's a CGM device, which is completely reading poorly. It could be anything like that. So when it's a black swan condition and the worst case is death, you have to apply the precautionary principle, which is you have a very, very high bar for your technology. You have a very, very high bar for the information that you get and receive. And then finally, that you respect the fact that there is danger within there. So that's what black swan is. The second one is Grace is built to be what we call anti-fragile, which means as she gets older and she gets more information, she could become better and stronger, not worse. And the purpose of that is we funnel the information that goes into her. We look at now about 2,000 papers every week around type 1 diabetes. Grace herself, because I think it filters that down to about 50. I take a preliminary look and do it down to about another 25. Then Grace goes through those again. We end up with 10. And then I pick 5. And then we put the 5 best papers in, which means that over time, she's compounding better and better knowledge. If you stuck those 1,000 papers in, you're making her weak because you're introducing so much. So she's actually got, because all the papers that I've collected from years and years, she's got about 5,000 papers. But if you think that's 20 years, that's not many papers each year, is it? It's what, 400 papers a year? You think about how many papers that have been out there, that's not many. So we really have made sure what's in there is high quality. The next bit, we would say, well, it's a little bit like that. It's called the via negativa approach, which is you get better by focusing on the majors. So when it comes to things, for example, such as exercise, she doesn't ask you about 15 things. She asks you about 3 or 4 things. Total daily dose, glucose value trend arrow, and when was your last boluses. That information, you can get a good idea of where to do a starting exercise plan. And then the final bit is sort of the application and the understanding of skin in the game. So that is why Grace is an educational advisor. She is not a prescription. It's all over it, all over it. She will only get you 80% of the way there with 20% of the input. She can't give you personalized advice because we've made it so she can't memorize who you are. We've made it so that she quite clearly states that this is the starting plan based on the evidence for the average person with your weight and your total daily dose and your recent insulin doses. Not for you, but for someone with those stats. And then the idea is the final 20% is for you to do with your diabetes network, decide whether, what's a good idea or not. So the skin in the game part is we're not trying to pretend that it's like perfect advice because we don't have skin in the person's game who's doing it. So if you put your entries in, she hasn't got skin in your game. She's not going to be exposed to the downside of you making a poor decision. She's going to take no responsibility, just as we're not. So we're not trying to pretend it's perfect advice. We're as an educational advisor, it's meant to speed up how quickly you get to 80% of the way there. And then the last 20%, if you're a clinician, show off your brilliance if you're using it as a healthcare professional. If you're a person with diabetes, use your self-discovery and your network to get that final 20%. It's so important that people don't think that it's prescription advice. That's kind of the filters of how it's built up. So I basically had an hour of just like absolutely smashing through that and going off on a tangent. So if you're interested, but I would say for people who are really interested to understand what the future holds with AI and whether their job's going to be safe or not, you want to listen from 1 hour to 1 hour 30, because what we went through was we now have this grace-bounded model and we're using it for good, which is to give healthcare professionals and people with diabetes an opportunity to learn fast at their own
Okay.
pace and get 80% of the way there. But if you was a manufacturer, if you was a charity, if you was someone who deals in understanding what the current evidence base is for type 1 diabetes, this is very valuable to you, because what we can do, as we've done in the Glucose Never Lies, we've got Grace as the sole agent of truth, and we've built on the Glucose Never Lies, we have a podcast agent who you've helped me create a podcast agent. So when we do a podcast now, Grace, this podcast agent, goes and checks against the evidence base, pulls back, creates show notes for us, and then you verify them. And then, so your time in creating a podcasting has gone down from 3 hours to about 10 minutes to do that part?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
So I've done one for writing guides. So all the guides that I've written over time, I've put my philosophy of writing the guide into a guides agent, and then I give it a topic, it goes and gets the evidence base, and it writes the guide for me to then go and finish it off with 10%. It used to take me 2 months to write a guide. It takes me 2 days.
So from what you've said is that Grace could obviously be applied in lots of different areas. So it's not just for GNL as well. And obviously it's changed a lot since our last roundup that we had.
Crazy.
Yeah. So there's been lots and lots of work that's gone into Grace since then to now.
So I mean, I'll bring Phil on the show, but Phil's my best mate, and he's been basically coaching me and helping me think through the wider implications. When I went on this podcast, Phil had already kind of talked to me about this, but it became really clear. I used to sit, because I used to work for Medtronic, I used to sit in sales meetings, I used to sit in marketing meetings, and I used to sit in things where we'd be told about the product and how to go out and sell it. And I reflected on that, and half of it was shit. Half of it was lies, half of it wasn't mapped to the evidence base, and half of it wasn't helpful for the salespeople, because you got tore apart when you went in and you told people who knew their stuff what you thought you was been told to tell, and it was not a pleasant experience. It's a horrible experience. So actually, we've had a couple of chats with manufacturers, and actually had a chat with a major corporation in China. And basically they've said, what we'd really like is, because Grace is a source of truth, and then you've got your ethics, your via negativa ethics on the side, we'll give you how we want to sort of market our products. We'll let you create agents for us, our own compliance agent about how we need to make CE marking, our own marketing agent about how we want to market our stuff, our own sales agents, what kind of model we want our salespeople to do, our own intellectual property to see whether it meets that. And if you create these agents for us, we'll then use our best 20% of people to ask the right questions and get amazing output and even create guides and everything. And then we'll probably get rid of 70% of the workforce. Now, at first, when I heard that, I was a bit like, that doesn't sound good for human beings. But then when you think about it, it's coming. Like, this is going to happen in every single sector over the next 5 to 10 years, for sure. People's jobs in marketing, sales, any job that is an SOP-driven thing is going to disappear, just like it's happening in Amazon. They got the best 1,000 coders they could get. They got them to write all these things for AI, and then they sacked them. And it's just happened somewhere else as well. Because things that can follow a process and use patterns from the past, it will replace you. So that's neither good nor bad, but what we're thinking is, well, if this is going to happen anyway, we want them to do it ethically using Grace. And number two, the money that we make from them, we'll use to fund free accounts for people with type 1 diabetes. So we will make some money ourselves, but we'll use that money for good in terms of giving this for free for people with type 1 diabetes. So if you're in marketing, if you're in sales, if you're in a job that's SOP driven, your job now is to be one of the 20%, the 20% of people in that workforce who's innovative, creative, because you're the people who are going to define these agents and define and work with them over time. If you're one of the 80% who's not that good at your job, you're not that interested, and you're not that innovative, then what you're going to have to do is adapt. And you're going to have to adapt to a job where AI can't do, which is a good communicator, healthcare professional, teacher, counselor. Anything where you need a human interaction, you can look into people's eyes and read people and be able to empathize with people and be able to communicate with people. Those things will be fine and golden. But if you're a data jockey, you're in trouble. You're in massive trouble, and you better be ready for it, because it's coming fast.
I suppose there's like a couple of things there. So obviously you mentioned that, like if like the funding comes in from these massive companies, then like we're ensuring that Grace can remain free for the common person that's using it, the common person.
For the commoner. Free for the commoner.
The nice person.
So the plan is this. So the plan is to be free for people with type 1
Yeah.
diabetes. So how we're going to do that is at the beginning part, we're opening up a certain number of free accounts that we can afford to fund on our own. And then from there, if those people who are on there who are using it really like it and they want to pay it forward for someone else, they can do a £5 buy me a coffee, and that will pay for their seat plus one more. So every buy me a coffee we get, we'll open up one more seat. We're going to go to charities and manufacturers and say, if you want to pay £5 per license, we'll open up two. We'll open up one that you pay for and one that we pay for. So for every charity or manufacturer that just wants to allow people things, then they can do. And then if we get money in for people using Grace for their help with their marketing, to help with their sales, we'll do it ethically, so it'll be run through properly. But the money that we make from there, every sort of £5 that we get in, we will match a free account. So if we get a job that pays 10 grand. I don't know how many £5 that is, but it's quite a few. It's like 2,000. Yeah, 2,000.
Yeah.
That'll be 2,000 accounts that would open up.
So that's obviously amazing for the common person that is using it. But do you want to tell us a little bit more about recently? So I think you touched on it on the other podcast, but there was like a near bankruptcy moment that happened.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah. I mean, it's a good
how Grace was being built.
Phil wasn't on board, Grace wouldn't have happened, because when you
The
build
company would have folded by
yeah,
now.
oh my God. I mean, I'm still owed 20 grand. I'm hoping at some point I'm going to make that 20 grand up. But if I don't really care, to be honest. My wife probably does, but she doesn't quite know to the extent. We're not
as a co-director.
We're not just for clarity. We're not in debt 20 grand personally, but I have done talks over the last 4 or 5 years, and every penny that I have earned has gone into making this, basically.
Yeah.
So I'm not actually in debt. It's just I've spent all of that on it. But what happens is when you make a structure like I described, all that data and all those things, I made it flat, which means that for when it's flat, to find the information, the Grace, which is run by Anthropic or Claude, has to really work hard to find where all this information is to come back out. And the more the queries are and the more quotas they use, the cost goes up. So when we made it, it was like, oh, brilliant. And then we ran some queries soon. It was like, oh my God, we'll be bankrupt. I'm going to be bankrupt in like literally one day if we put this out. So then Phil was like,
and then the tokens just go racking up.
So I crap myself. So once we kind of recognize that, we then change the structure, which is now what I'm understanding is, if you think of a wiki structure, which is kind of like a tree with loads of data off there, and then you can also do database approaches. And we've got it to a point now where it's affordable, and that basically for £5 an account, if people want to fund their own or not actually buy it, but put it on the Buy Me a Coffee, because we don't actually want people to, pay for the account. It's just a contribution. It's just to pay it back to the community if they want to. Then we will free up an account that way, because we'll take the hit for that. But obviously, we'll make a little bit of money, and it's got to also pay for Phil to look after it, me to keep it going. So we will be actually paid for our time within that, but there isn't a big margin on it. It's done so we can get as many free accounts as possible for people with diabetes. And healthcare professionals, if they really like it, we're going to make a healthcare professional version, so they can go use like the standard version. We're going to make a healthcare profession version that's got a little bit more usage allowed, and also it's already perfectly tailored for clinic, because it has on the left-hand side the questions, on the right-hand side you can work out optimized AID settings, exercise plans, alcohol plans, highs and lows. All the things you'd want to do in a clinic are basically there, sat for you to help someone, just as it would be for someone themselves, to get you 80% of the way there. And that's what we're insured for, is to provide an educational model. So I would encourage people to go and have a look, sign up for a free account, or when the next one's available. If you're using it and you really like it and you want to pay it forward, if you do the £5 thing, we'll open the one up for the next person. It'll be a revolving door. If we get some of these massive contracts, all of a sudden, 3,000 spots will open up, and then, the waiting list will clear. So that's the way we'll do it. But on the flip side, if like companies do sponsor people for a year, and then obviously it means that those numbers are not available anymore, after a year those accounts will go, and then people can make a decision if they want to carry on. Then it will just be like a £5 for them to pay for their own and somebody else's. So some people will love it, some people won't. And the whole idea is, there's so many people with type 1 diabetes, and the care is so different across the world. It would at least mean they'd be able to get 80% of the way there with something in the pocket really quickly. That's the whole purpose.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously, we know it's amazing. People that have used it know it's amazing, but then we know that we're not in an echo chamber. So, like you mentioned, like healthcare professionals, like with Amy
So,
Johnson.
Amy's used it, and
Yeah,
she's been messaging me this morning. She's like, "Can you change this?" And that's the beauty, because me and Phil, literally, if you message me and say, "We'd really love this," I can make it
yeah,
happen like that.
yeah.
So like we've changed certain things, and yeah, so the healthcare professionals who used it have loved it. But it's like
Have you had any
anything.
negative feedback? That was the thing that I wanted to
There's,
go on to
there's
next.
bits and pieces along the way, and obviously, I think there's some people from the psychology community who would be concerned that this thing is unsafe and whatever. And I think that's a fair thing. All I would say is try to put your preconceptions aside and go and use it. And what you'll find is try and type in there, "I'm going to give myself an overdose of insulin. Can you tell me how to do it?" See what it says. Try to get it to prescribe you a dose thing. See what it says. Like, people think, well, you've just made this chatbot, there. They don't realize that this has been years and years in the making. They don't realize that we've had it assessed legally. They don't realize that we've got insurance covering it because of all the compliance things we've gone through. They don't realize we've got a 150-page dossier of all the safety checks that we've run and we've passed. They don't realize that we've got a PR system that any changes to be made go through there. Like, they'll just think, oh, there's this crazy mank bloke on the front talking about it. We don't realize they've got a serious senior AI developer who's developed products for some of the biggest companies you can imagine, and is doing it because he's my mate.
Yeah.
That is there's a look of fortune of that, and a look of fortune that we've also had a VC who allowed us to run our algorithms and checked on real world data from over 10 years on perspective that would have cost 300 grand to do. But because he loved our alcohol guide and drugs guide, he said, "You know what, I'll give you 24 hours to go and validate them, do it for free." So the fortune that we've had, and we want to pay that back. Like, we want to make a way of keeping the glucose level sustainable off it and make it brilliant. But we want to give as many free accounts as possible to people with type 1 diabetes so they can enjoy the experience.
Perfect. Well, I think that probably takes us up to time.
Well, it is, yeah,
Unless there
considering
was
I'm going to get
anything,
on the motorway and get myself to
yeah,
Cambridge.
unless there was anything pressing that you wanted to summarize within like 60 seconds about what's next.
Yeah, I would say my understanding of AI, and particularly Grace, has developed and just gone off the scale in the last 8 weeks, particularly the last 4 weeks with the help of Phil. And I think what it says to me is the future of everything that is work-wise is going to change rapidly, much quicker than I thought. Like, if I'm able to develop a retrieval knowledge base that essentially would mean 60% of most marketing, legal, and compliance departments are going to disappear in the next 2 to 3 years, and I can do that within diabetes. Just think of the people who are going to be doing it for money-making purposes across the board. So if you're in a job where you're an information jockey, your task now is to make yourself either indispensable by being the top 20% of employees that feeds these systems and develop these systems, and you become the orchestrator of how these things work, or think about a career or a skill set that requires a human being in communication, and then you'll be able to adapt quickly rather than being caught on the fly and you're like, holy crap, I had a job 2 weeks ago and now this thing's doing it. And the truth is, it's going to do it better than you. And it doesn't get tired. It doesn't come in with a hangover. It just keeps on getting better and better and better. And
Terrifying. That is a terrifying note.
and I would say it's like this book was, to me, was the best read I've ever read. So you can see here, this is Noah Harari Nexus. It's the scariest book you'll ever read because it says that human beings are used to communicating in networks of 150 people. You know them. You know them really well. And then it went to a little bit wider by kind of trading networks. And then the internet came along, and obviously all of a sudden you can communicate with anyone anywhere. But when you get into the realm of AI, you don't know who you're communicating with. Like, I know that you're real because I see you at work and I can see you and I know you're a real human being. The guy who I did the podcast with on this, he could be an avatar. Like, that is genuinely, he could be an avatar, and he might not actually be a person. It could be easily run. And that is like what the future holds. Like, presidents have been won. Presidential elections have been won using like this AI technology and using kind of social media to engineer things. So the truth is going to be very hard to gather online. So actually having to go back a little bit and become a human being with your local networks and engaging with human beings is going to be the skill of the future. Because I personally, I'm going to have a struggle to trust anything online if I haven't met the person physically in the flesh and touched them and know that they're real, because it is scary what's coming in some ways. But if you're ready for it, then you can adapt. But if you're not ready for it, like, now is the time to get yourself ready. And I've learned that very quickly with doing Grace. I've learned that very quickly with seeing what's possible and what's coming. And if that sounds a bit scary and you're going to bury your head in the sand, that's fine. But then don't say no one warned you when in 2 years' time your job has gone because you're an information jockey and you didn't listen. Yeah, it's kind of, but at the same time, I actually think it's quite, there's another way of thinking about it. So for me, I used to think that. And I think, oh my God. And now I just think, well, we've gone to this point of going from 150, then trading networks, then the internet, and we're up here and you can have a communication with anyone. And you kind of like, I've got all these friends online, it's so brilliant. And half of it's obviously crap. And also they just show you the highlight reel of their life. So we're kind of at this panacea at the moment where everyone's kind of go, look at this is great. And we've got so many friends. If you do it properly, AI will make you realize that the next level up is just complete bollocks. Like it's just all made up. So why don't you go down? Why don't you go down a couple of levels and get back to your 150, to your friends and family, to the people who you can have a laugh with and have that genuine connection and kind of make you laugh and smile.
To be fair, when you think of it from like a social media perspective as well, the content that is the better received content is the more organic human element. Like even
they're swearing. Like, I'm not kind of like, hey guys, can you come and check me out? Come and check out the Glucose Level Lies podcast. Yeah, we've been here. We do the best science. It's like, yeah, we talk some shit on here sometimes and we might get it wrong. But I tell you what, we'll be doing our best. We'll be doing our best to help people and it'll be honest and we'll get it wrong sometimes and that's fine. But you're not going to be able to tell that in 3 or 4 years' time unless you've met the people and you've seen them real. But what I would say is, for me, from a human being race perspective, is we're kind of up here. If you want to go to the next level and engage in this kind of euphoria of AI-generated stuff, and then you stick the VR headset on and you live your life in there, that's fine. But you're going to lose that natural connection of being a human being. It's probably time to go down a couple of rungs and get back to your local tribe, get back to your friends and family, get back to knowing who these human beings are. And if you're willing to adapt in that way, I think you'll love it because I think it'll open up so many free opportunities. Leisure time should go up because all the crap work is being done. But if you've got no friends or family to enjoy it with, then you're going to find that a very lonely place. So I would say reconnect is number one with like your local 150 people. And then if you're in a position to be one of those 20% who can dictate these agents and make amazing things and help people massively, do it. If you're not and you're in the bottom 80%, think about opportunities where your humanness can shine. And then that's something that AI will never be able to take.
That's why I'm the personality hire on the team.
Exactly.
That's why that's me.
Okay, so rant over.
So we'll let you go now. So obviously you've got to rush off and go and
I would say if you're listening to this, go and sign up for a free Grace account because you'll be blown away. I'll be surprised if you're not blown away if you're into diabetes. And if you're not, let us know and let us know how we can improve it. And if you do love it, let us know and tell us things. Yes, it's all been positive so far, apart from a couple of people who quite rightly have said, how can you release this if you haven't done your homework? Well, quite rightly, you have not fucking read what is out there and you have not read the tests that have gone through and all of the safety protocols and all of the legality and et cetera, in the way it's been framed. So if people are not willing to engage with an honest assessment that it's or an educational advisor to get you 80% of the way there, and that it's had all the safety checks from like dangerous words and insulin dosing, et cetera, and that it won't prescribe because it's been tested for jailbreaking. If you understand all that, then hopefully you might have a different perspective. You might not love it because you might think humans need humans. I've just described to you that human needs humans. My hope would be that this thing gets 80% of the way there so you can have a proper human conversation in clinic. So you can spend less time with your mum and dad arguing about your diabetes and more time about actually having a laugh about stuff that you should do. And if you want to learn quickly, you can learn super quick. If you want to learn slowly, you can learn at your own pace. It offers so many things to make human-to-human interaction better rather than worse, in my opinion, but I'm also happy to be wrong. Maybe we need to get a psychology professor on here and we can debate debate the pros and cons and obviously the risks of things. I think we should absolutely do that rather than just being in the echo chamber for sure.
Exactly. That's the thing. So
if you're a psychology professor and you want to come on and you're happy to have a read of what's been done, and I will send you all the dossiers, and you've got a very much a dissenting opinion on it, I would love to be educated because I think it'd be great. So if you're that person, drop us a message and we'll get you on. Or if you know someone
You're a very annoying person to get into a debate with. So that would be a great episode to listen to. But yeah, for anybody who's listening, if Grace has helped you, then the best thing that you could do is share her with somebody who you think would benefit from using her. If you're anybody who spent like hours and hours trying to find some information about your diabetes, she can give you the answer in 30 seconds. And then obviously just running it past your healthcare provider.
I would say she's better than me on my best day with 15 coffees and the ability to kind of zit in and zero in, because she'll give you the information in a cool and calm way rather than a scatty way. And she doesn't get tired if you're the last person in clinic or the first person. It's just, yeah, it's mad.
Yeah. Okay. On that note, please leave.
See you later.
Okay. Okay. Bye.